Hey everyone, it's Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Show. And today we're going to raise your game. Imagine if you had time with someone who helped navigate the likes of Kevin Durant or Steph Curry or even the incredible, late, phenomenally great Kobe Bryant, as well as American Express, Starbucks, and the list goes on and on and on. I want to welcome to the Massimo Show, Mr. Alan Stein Jr. Hi, this is Rod Santomassimo, and welcome to the Massimo Show. The objective of the Massimo Show is to share how you can maximize your personal, professional margin. That's right. Let's make more money in less time. Let's turn chaos into clarity, confusion into confidence, and income into real wealth. Along with sharing my insight on how I grew a multi-million-dollar professional business, we're going to bring you the expert advice from a variety of authors, consultants, and thought leaders who will provide the tools you need to maximize your own personal and professional margin. Welcome to the Massimo Show. Alan, welcome.
Oh my goodness, it's so wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much.
The honor is all ours, buddy. So Alan, the way we work here at the Massimo Group, because everyone starts somewhere, so we're going to start where you started. So Alan, tell us. We talked a little offline. I know you went to college, but where are you from when you grew up in the high school years? Did you have a passion, and what was that passion?
Most certainly. So I grew up where I live now, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. And I think the most important part of my journey is that when I was 4 years old, my parents signed me up for my first basketball team. And basketball was my first identifiable passion. It was the first thing that I fell in love with. And I'm very thankful that here 40 years later, basketball is still a major pillar in my life. And the reason I share that is I'm grateful that I've been able to make a life and make a living around something that I love, something I'm passionate about, and something I've always had an affinity for. So even though what I do currently is more corporate keynote speaking and writing, it's all done through the lens of someone that has spent his entire career around the game of basketball.
Well, that is absolutely awesome. So when you said a passion, a love for the game, so you got your first basketball in your hands at 4 years old. That's incredible. That's a young age. And then, so did you play basketball? Did you manage the team? What was your role in basketball still when you were in high school?
Well, it certainly started as a player and played all through my youth. And I did try a variety of different sports. I mean, I played every sport under the sun. You know, certainly your baseball, football, volleyball, hockey, but also did some unconventional sports like martial arts, skateboarding, BMX biking. So I had an opportunity to try a lot of different things. And yet I always came back to basketball. Basketball was always my favorite. It was always the winner. So even though I was very active in a variety of capacities, basketball is that red thread that's been through my entire life. And I was a pretty decent public school player at the high school level, was able to play on scholarship down at Elon, which when I went in the 90s, it was actually Elon College. It's now Elon University. Had an opportunity to play there. And when I was at Elon, I started to develop an equal love for performance training, for strength and conditioning, and for fitness, improving athleticism, becoming stronger, more powerful, and more fit. So when I graduated college and I realized my playing days were over, at least my formal playing days, I decided to pursue a career where I could combine my original love of basketball with my newfound love of performance training. And I became a basketball performance coach right out of college. And I did that for almost 20 years, had an opportunity to work with some pretty remarkable players and coaches. And then 4 years ago, I made a very distinct pivot to take everything that I had learned from the game and learn from these great players like the ones you mentioned before and show folks how to apply those same principles and mindsets and habits into business.
Let's talk about that for a second. And I want to go back again. We're saying about high school, college, you're transitioning, performance training. Let's define for the audience, what exactly is performance training?
Well, when I first started in the field, it was called strength and conditioning. And the goal was, as the title implies, to get players stronger so they'd be more resilient to injury and to help them get in really good shape so that they could be just as fresh in the fourth quarter as they were in the first quarter. But over time, started to realize that title was kind of confining because what I was doing with these players was more than just strength and just conditioning. I mean, we would work on a variety of capacities, some of which were in the physical, flexibility and mobility, and hand-eye coordination and balance. But then some of them were on the mental side as well. I mean, I did just as much on helping players with their mindset and their habits as I did with strength and conditioning. So over time, I kind of morphed that title to performance because I was taking a much more encapsulating approach to making sure that they could improve their skills. So the way I defined performance training was I addressed everything except for the skills of the game. So I never taught players how to handle the ball or to shoot. That was left to their basketball coaches and trainers. But I taught them how to eat well, how to take care of their bodies, how to improve their athleticism, how to have a winning mindset, how to develop an environment and habits to support all of those things. And that's where I spent, most of my career. And that's the same stuff I do now in the corporate space. I just do so to a different audience.
So there's really two aspects, especially in the business side, I would think, and we're going to talk about these in more depth. But so you didn't necessarily focus on the shooting or the dribbling, but you do in your book, for example, which we'll get to, you do focus on, you have to master the fundamentals. Because without the fundamentals, it's really hard to, it's not a solid foundation. It's hard to build and grow from there. So where do the fundamentals come in? We'll talk about mindset in a second, but where do the fundamentals come in on the corporate side, the business side now? Where do you see that and its place and its role?
I love the direction you're going. And right before I answer that, let me say that, so when I was a performance coach in basketball, my job was to help players create the soundest foundation possible so that then when they did learn the skills of the game, they'd be the best player they could be. And I'm doing the same thing in the corporate space now. I actually work with a lot of sales professionals, and I don't teach them a sales philosophy or a sales protocol. What I do is I create the foundation so that when they apply their sales philosophy or sales protocol, they're as effective as possible. So once again, my audience has changed, but my approach to how I help folks hasn't. And that piggybacks nicely to what you asked about the fundamentals. The life-changing lesson that I learned from the first time I met Kobe Bryant was the secret to his success, and this was what he told me directly, was that he never gets bored with the basics, that he has such a strong appreciation and respect for the fundamentals that he knows that he has to constantly work to master those. And yes, he will eventually graduate to more advanced moves and techniques and drills, but he has to constantly be trying to pursue the basics and work on the fundamentals. And he does that because he respects the game, because he respects the process, and I take that same approach in the corporate space. One of the first things I do if I'm giving a keynote or leading a workshop, even if it's virtual, is I want folks, whether they're executives on the leadership team or they're sales professionals or they're in HR, is I want them to get great clarity on what their basics are, on what are their fundamentals. In the game of basketball, it's pretty obvious. It's the skills of the game. Mm-hmm. It's shooting, passing, rebounding, defending. So if I'm working with sales professionals or entrepreneurs, I say, okay, what are some of the basics that if you master these things, it will give you a greater ceiling on reaching your potential? The ones that works almost universally with anyone is something you're doing a great job of right now, and that's being an active listener. If you want to improve in sales, if you want to improve your influence and impact as a leader or as an executive, you have to learn how to become a better listener. So I often say that listening to folks in the corporate world is very similar to footwork is in the game of basketball. And if Kobe Bryant is going to spend, 30 minutes every day of his life getting better at footwork, then I think leaders and sales professionals should spend time getting better at the basic or the fundamental of becoming a better active listener.
Yeah, in fact, in your book, you say, listen, not to respond, listen to connect, not to reply, which are just a basic sales foundation. What an incredible pillar. So expand on that a little bit from a sales side. And I understand, but help the audience expand on that a little bit, please. What does that principle mean from a sales perspective?
Well, first and foremost, it's so important for everyone listening to this to realize that you are in sales, even if it's not part of your title. If you're not technically in sales at work, if you are a leader, a director, a manager, an executive, even if you're a parent, you are in sales because at the very least, you are trying to sell your ideas, you're selling your culture, you're selling your philosophy, you're selling your core beliefs, you're selling your standards. So we all are trying to sell something, even if you're not selling a product or service. And I learned from a good mentor of mine that telling is not selling. that if you want to sell anything, whether you're selling a widget, you're selling a service, or you're selling an idea, that trying to beat the other person over the head with your features and benefits and all of the reasons that they should be buying from you is not the most effective way to do it. The most effective way is to ask insightful questions. Once you've qualified a prospect, is you ask insightful questions. And if you ask the right questions of the right fit, then you don't have to convince them to buy anything. They'll convince themselves. So I've learned that the only way we can know if someone's a right fit and to really qualify someone and to make sure that this is going to be a mutually beneficial transaction is to make sure that we're active listeners.
I can't agree with you more. We've been working and studying with thousands of independent contractors, all salespeople, right? For the years we've been doing that and looking at their fundamentals, what they're doing, where they are, what metrics. So now when it comes to performance though, right? So you're going to build a foundation. A client of mine asked me years ago, Ron, so what you're telling me is we got to build a foundation before we break through the ceiling. I looked at him and said, man, that is so well articulated. I'm going to steal that one. I'm going to definitely use that one. So they're building this foundation, right? We'll talk about some basketball, but more importantly on the business side for you now. So what are some of the ways that we can help performance? Now we get the foundation built out. There's a lot of mindset issues coming to play now. There's no doubt. There absolutely is. I did a series, a session recently with a gentleman named Andy Andrews. I don't know if you know Andy is. He's an international bestseller. But he talked a lot about mindset and performance, whether it be someone on the Kansas City Royals or someone in the White House. He had both audience. So in your world, when you talk performance, mindsets can be a very limiting element, can it not?
Yeah, it is the number one limiting element. I would love to dive into mindset. I mean, that's what will make or break any entrepreneur or executive or sports figure in any walk of life. But before we go down that road, I want to touch on what you just said, because I love that analogy. When we look at a foundation, the foundation of a basketball player is their athleticism and the way that they move. And then when we start to build layers on top of that, and we do build a basketball player the same way you'd build a pyramid, the bottom is that foundation. It's their body. Then the next level up is actually their skill sets. And can they shoot, pass, rebound, defend? The next level above that is their mindset. It's their basketball IQ. It's their grit. It's their resilience. It's how they handle adversity, and we have to make sure that we build them in that order. No different than the way that you'd build a house. Now, in full transparency, I am not very handy. I'm not very good with tools. I can't fix things. I can't build things. But I've certainly, driven through enough neighborhoods and seen enough houses constructed to know that the very first thing they do is lay the foundation to the house, which most of the time is concrete. It's going to be something incredibly sturdy. And once they've built that, then they start building the framework of the house. And then once they have the framework in place, that's when you put on the roof and you put up the siding and you do all of the things that I'm not even smart enough to talk about. But there's a very distinct order in which they do that.
What you said is so profound and so applicable to anyone, athlete, okay, but business person, absolutely. What I heard you say that order was foundation first. It's got to be solid, and that could be, that could be family, that could be faith, and certainly is relationships, certainly is your self-reflection, right? And that goes a little above. Then comes the skill set. Okay, I got the foundation set, but you're right. Without the right foundation, I don't care how good you are, right? It's going to be impossible. And I know you went to Elon, I went to grad school, Duke, and in between there's a school called UNC, which us Dukies don't really talk about. But there's a guy named Michael Jordan who said straight out, fundamentally, I do whatever is better than anybody else. And as we said, superior athlete, superior mindset competitor, but fundamentally, he did anything better than anybody else. Of course, with people like you, he had a fantastic body and it's ready to do it. But that foundation, without that, can you imagine Jordan going out with a sprained wrist or a strained knee? It just wouldn't be as there, no matter what the skills are. Point is, foundation has to come first. Then you said skills. Yep, without the skills, so what, right? But then you really said mindset. Here's what we're going to do, Alex. This is really, I love where this is going.
Cool.
We're going to take a short break here. We're going to come back. We're going to dive into mindset because it's so important. But I also know our audience is going to say, well, give us one good basketball story. Come on. So we won't let Alan go until he does. But the mindset, folks, is where it's at. I mean, basketball is entertaining, but what he's talking about is transformational. So we're going to talk about that when we come back with Alan Stein Jr. and the Massimo Show. Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Show. And oh boy, am I pumped. My new book, Knowing Isn't Doing. Well, when it launched, it hit #1. That's right. Top-selling sales book in the entire country on Amazon.com. We're so excited to share many of our proprietary Massimo methods to allow our readers to start finally building that business and the life they've always desired. To get your own copy or learn more, visit www.knowingisn'tdoing.com. Hey everyone, it's Rod Santomassimo back with the Massimo Show and Alan Stein Jr., the performance coach, the expert, the consultant to not only the athletic stars, but the corporate stars. So before we left, we started talking about the 3 key pillars of growth: foundation, obviously, then getting a skill set, and then next, and finally, you got the right mindset. So, Alan, welcome back. Let's talk about mindset. What does that mean? Everyone assumes, oh yeah, how I'm feeling, how I'm thinking, but help us out.
There's a few things when it comes to mindset, and I love the way that we're building this from a practitioner standpoint. Like we said, we've got the foundation, then we put up the framework, and then we fill in all the bits and pieces. When it comes to mindset, really what we're talking about is your self-awareness, your emotional intelligence, your ability to recognize and understand and process your own emotions. One thing that I've learned about emotions, and this has been really important during the year 2020, which has been a very challenging year and a unique year to say the least, is our emotions are designed to inform us, not to direct us. So that's really, really important, because if you're in a position of leadership or you're in business, it's not that there's anything wrong with your emotions, but you have to be very careful that they're not dictating your behavior. During a year like this, where I'm sure everyone listening to this at some point, whether your business has gone well or your business has suffered, you've been on somewhat of an emotional roller coaster. There have been some highs and some lows. But the key to high performance is making sure that we're steadily improving. That grade and that ramp is slowly going up. It's not ebbing and flowing with the way that we feel. So part of having an elite mindset is being able to recognize your emotions, but not let them dictate your performance. Another component of an elite mindset is saying, I'm going to do the best I can with what I have, where I am. I'm not going to make excuses. I'm not going to blame anyone else, and I'm not going to complain. The highest performers that I've ever been around don't make excuses. They don't blame anyone else. They hold themselves fully accountable, and they don't complain. Instead of putting their energy into complaining, they put their energy into something that can actually make a difference in trying to move forward.
Okay, I love it. So people struggle. You're right. This is a tough time, Alan. It just is. It's a really challenging time. And then for those who are parents out there, it's always been said, and someone told me this the other day, I said, well, that is so true, that our level of happiness is just based on the unhappiness level of one of our children. If one of our children are unhappy, then we're unhappy, and that affects everything. So, Alan, what can you share and help people with those that are struggling right now, maybe with family issues, maybe with health issues, maybe with work issues? What do you tell someone, just focus on this, or let's build on that? Like for right now, we're really challenging our clients right now. Each day have a win. Just have one small win, please. So what are you doing?
I actually love that you just said the word win, because that's where I was going with this. The next part of mindset, which you led to so insightfully, is to learn how to be in the present moment. And there's a few different ways that we can look at being in the present moment. One of my favorites is actually the acronym WIN, W-I-N, and that stands for what's important now. One of the things that makes what we're going through as a society so challenging is people are either getting distracted by the past and looking too far backwards, or they're getting really anxious about the future and they're looking too far forward. And when you combine either being distracted with being anxious, then you don't have the mindset, required to be your best self and to be the best leader and performer that you're capable of. And the way we alleviate getting distracted and or getting anxious is by drilling down in the present moment and saying, what is the most important thing right now? Sometimes the most important thing right now is putting your phone aside and being fully present with your family while you're having dinner. Sometimes what's important right now is you're on a really cool podcast show with a great host, and I want to make sure that I'm giving you everything that I've got to add value to your listeners. So I'm not doing anything else. I'm not concerned about anything else. You have my full undivided attention right now. And then when this call is over, I'll shift my focus to what's important right now, or then, I guess we'd say. So it's the ability to be fully in the present moment. And I find that when you can do that, not only will you perform at a higher level, but you'll actually be much happier and much more fulfilled.
I love it. That's so true. So as we look forward, Alan, and people are struggling, but there is clarity. And look, it doesn't matter when you listen to this podcast. As of the date of this podcast, we're hearing that maybe potential vaccines. We're seeing that things are ebb and flow from infection rates and everything else. But look, I got to tell you, Alan, based on this, I just got the phone with my tax accountant, and every year he's more of a strategist than accountant. And he just told me he gave a big speech in Phoenix, which was great, I thought, last week. And he told everyone, look, with all the elections going on, the world has never stopped. So let's get out of this doom and gloom approach. There is going to be a tomorrow. There is. So, Alan, help the audience understand there is going to be a tomorrow.
Oh, there most certainly is. In fact, I'm a self-diagnosed quote nerd, and one of my favorite quotes of all time is, "Today is always over, tomorrow." And I say that for a couple of reasons. When things are going really, really well, just understand that tomorrow is a new day, and you need to try to re-earn those good things in your life. When things are really challenging and really adverse and you're really struggling, just know tomorrow's a new day to start fresh and to make things a little bit better. I know for me, what I choose to do, and this is also part of mindset, is I put as much of my attention, focus, and energy into the only two things in this world I have 100% control over, and that's my effort and my attitude. I try to disregard everything else. I don't control this pandemic, obviously. I don't control if and when there'll be a vaccine. I don't control if and when speakers like myself will be allowed back on stages. I don't control any of that. So if I don't control it, I don't want to put any of my mental currency into it or emotional currency. So I focus on giving the best effort in everything that I do, because that is controllable, and having the best attitude in everything that I do. And part of that attitude is how I respond to everything else going around. How do I respond to the fact there's a global pandemic that is preventing me from making my living the way that I would normally make it? How do I respond to the fact that my children have to do online virtual learning instead of going to school? All of those things, they may not be preferences of mine. They might be really hard, but how I choose to respond to those things, my attitude is going to dictate, what tomorrow looks like for me.
Yeah, I hear two things there, like taking out from you. This idea of control, and it's hard. I understand for everyone. And it's hard for me. It's hard for Alan. It's hard for everybody. But if you don't have control, why worry about it? You can't control it. And if you can control it, then you don't need to worry about it because you can control it. It's a hard lesson, but you got to take a perspective. But you said something I thought was really intuitive. And I go back to one of the quotes in your book because you talked about this idea of overcoming and adapting to pandemics, not speaking, and then going back to be speaking. So you say there that, overcoming obstacles while being very impressive, it's more impressive to realize these are really opportunities and taking advantage of them. So help us with that.
Very much so. I mean, by trade at present, I am a keynote speaker. Well, most people realize that most in-person events have been canceled and have been since March. And I don't necessarily know when they'll go to reopen again. So one of the very first things I did when this pandemic hit was remind myself that speaking is what I do. It's not who I am. And that's really, really important because who I am at my heart, I am a coach, I am a teacher, I'm a practitioner. I'm someone that wants to fill other people's buckets. I hope that when someone is listening or watching to this, at the end of it, they think, you know what, my tank is just a little bit more filled than it was when I started listening to this, that Alan and Rod gave me some things that I can actually apply to my life. So when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to speak on stages, then I quickly shifted and said, okay, what are some other mediums or platforms or ways for me to still fill people's buckets, still be of service, still help other people? And a good portion of that has been virtual experiences like you and I right now speaking via Zoom. So for me, that was a really important distinction to be able to remember that. And we all need to be able to have the adaptability to pivot and slightly reinvent ourselves anytime the circumstances change. I mean, the way I looked at it when the pandemic hit, I had a choice. I could sit back with my arms folded and pout about the adverse conditions that were destroying my business, or I could lean into it, get excited and say, wow, this is a new opportunity for me to serve people in a new way and in a different way. It's a way for me, it's an opportunity for me to sharpen my sword and grow some different skill sets. Like, this can turn into a good thing if I approach it correctly. And you said something before that is really paramount, and I want to make sure everyone understands this. What I just explained is very basic in premise, but it's not easy to do. And I don't want everyone to think that every moment of every day, I'm this happy-go-lucky, positive, optimistic guy. That's not always the case. You know, and in fact, I think toxic positivity, I think pretending to be positive when you're not really feeling that way isn't helping anybody. It's kind of phony and disingenuous, if you will. So while I am wired to be, I'm usually a glasses half full type of guy. I've had my moments of despair. I've had my moments of discouragement. But what I do is I take a deep breath and say, okay, I'm feeling a little down right now. What's the best response I can have to this that will start generating some momentum so I can start moving forward again? I don't beat myself up over it. I don't self-loathe and think, make things worse. I just simply say, you know what? I've hit a tough patch. I'm feeling a little bit down. I don't want to stay here. So what's a mindset or a response or an approach I can have to allow me to move forward?
I love it. I love it. Well, Alan, this has been a trip. I got to tell you, I've written so many things down beyond the highlighting the quotes in the book and everything else. Today is always over tomorrow. I got to use that with my kids. So,
yes,
so take us home, Alan. Give us a story and anecdote to take us home.
Well, there's two things I want to share before we leave. And you have to realize I am kind of like a caged lion being a keynote speaker who can't be out on stage. One of the things that I hope would be the most practical and applicable thing to anyone listening to this is a mental construct I use, and it has really changed my life. And here's what I want everyone to do. Even though I want you to be present, I do want you to take just a few moments and think about the future. And the future could be 6 months from now, could be 6 years from now, or if you want to use the same one I use, I try to look 20 years down the road. So I'm 44 years old at present. I can picture with great clarity the man that I want to be when I'm 64 years old, 20 years from now. And without getting into too much detail, I want the 64-year-old Alan to be physically, mentally, and emotionally fit. I want the 64-year-old Alan to have a really deep connection with his children, his family, his friends, and the people most important to him. I want the 64-year-old Alan to be doing what he considers meaningful work in service of others. So that's the vision of who I want to become. Now, in the present moment, I do my very best to make sure every single decision I make in my life is in alignment with becoming that person. From what I eat for breakfast to who I follow on Instagram to, what I watch on Netflix, I want to ask myself, is doing this thing going to get me closer to being that guy, or is it going to take me further away? And then obviously my goal every day of my life is to get as many of those decisions to line up as possible. Now, I'm going to make some mistakes. I'm going to have some lapse of judgment and poor decisions and occasionally do some things that aren't in alignment with that guy. But I'm not interested in perfection. What motivates me much more is progress. So as long as I can put my head on my pillow every night and say the vast majority of decisions I made today were in alignment with becoming that person, then assuming I live for 20 more years on this planet, that is the man that I will become. It won't be an accident and it won't be luck. I am designing my future right now by the decisions that I make today. And that's one of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself every night when you go to bed. Say, I just traded 24 hours of my life for the progress I made today. Am I happy with that trade?
Wow. That is phenomenal. Phenomenal. Now, you said you had two things. I think that was one. Was there something else?
Well, I didn't want to leave your audience hanging without a quick basketball story. So I wanted to share one really quick. Back in 2007, I had a chance to work the Kobe Bryant Skills Academy. And what a lot of folks don't know was there was actually a college counselor at that academy. And at the time, he did not have the physical stature or resume of all of the other college counselors. But there was something about this young man that was different. It was palpable. And the most impressive of these traits was at the end of the very first workout, he tapped on my shoulder. We had never met or been formally introduced. And he said, "Coach, will you rebound for me? because I don't leave the gym until I swish 5 free throws in a row. Well, for any of your listeners that have never shot a basketball themselves, let me tell you, 5 swishes in a row is a really high standard. A swish, by definition, is a perfect shot. And this young man was not going to leave until he made 5 perfect shots in a row, which means he could swish 4 in a row, hit a little bit of the rim on the 5th one. It would still go in. He'd still mathematically be perfect, but that wasn't good enough for him. He'd start over. And if memory serves, it never took him longer than 12 to 15 minutes to swish 5 in a row. Well, that young man was Stephen Curry of the Golden State Warriors. And Stephen Curry will go down in history as the greatest shooter that the game has ever seen. And as I said before, it's not by accident and it's not by luck. And it's not even because his dad played in the NBA. It's because he's willing to hold himself to an unparalleled standard of excellence, and he's willing to create unparalleled habits. So that's the thought that I'd like to leave your audience with, is this final question. Are the habits that you have today on par with the dreams you have for tomorrow?
It's both a high level of excellence, to say the least, and an incredible session and thought-provoking. So thank you so much, Alan. But Alan, can't we go yet? People want more of Alan. How do they get more of you?
The easiest way, my hub is alansteinjr.com. If anyone listening, if there's any way I can be of service to you or your business, even virtually, if your troops need a little dose of inspiration or pick me up, I've got a variety of virtual deliverables, or when things do open back up, if you want to host a workshop or something. I'm also at Alan Stein Jr. on all of the major social platforms. So you can hit me up on Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook. And then I do have the book, Raise Your Game. You can go to raiseyourgamebook.com, or you can pick it up on Amazon or Audible if you'd rather listen to it. And then I also have a podcast by the same name, the Raise Your Game Show, where we unpack the secrets of high performance.
I love it. I love it, Alan. Thank you so much for your incredibly valuable time and insights. And I got to tell you, what's important now? Keep on with the win streak. I love it. Hey, folks, you learned a lot. Alan's unpacked a lot for you today. As I always share with you, what Alan did today was give you, well, far and beyond so much knowledge. But as you know, knowing isn't doing. So don't kid yourself. Go out and apply what Alan's saying and watch your business, your life, and your mindset start to grow. Until next time, this is Rod Santomassimo with The Massimo Show. I want to thank you for listening to this version of The Massimo Show. And please, please go out and share this with your friends, your colleagues. Heck, share it with your dog. Just share it. And more importantly, just give me some feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. We all grow from understanding what our audience wants to hear. So until next time, this is Rod Santomassimo with The Massimo Show. Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Group. And did you know over the last 12 plus years, we've worked with thousands of independent contractors, solopreneurs, and small business owners, and helping them achieve the business and the life that they've always desired. To learn more how we could possibly help you achieve your goals, please visit www.massimo.coach. That's www.massimo.coach.